So I wanted to introduce our first speaker, Jocelyn Allen. Jocelyn is a marketing and communications guru, an entrepreneur, and brings creativity to diversity and inclusion to marketing strategies. This fall, she will teach the first ever diversity and inclusion course for the WVU IMC program. So please give a warm welcome to Jocelyn.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Okay, come on. I'm a preacher's kid, and I'm used to call and response, so I'm going to try this again. Good morning, everyone. Good morning. There you go. Don't worry. There will be no collection plate. Really excited to be here with you on this fabulous Friday morning, the first Friday in August. Very excited to be asked to be here. Didn't realize I was teaching the first diversity and inclusion class, no pressure, but very excited to do that as well. So want to just jump right in. Can you hear me okay up there? Okay, want to jump right in. First of all, just want to talk a little bit about myself and kind of my background and I guess what qualifies me to teach the first ever diversity and inclusion course in the IMC program here, and then spend a little time talking about the business case of diversity. It's very important. Corporations, brands have limited funds to spend on outreach, so when you start talking about reaching out to ethnic, minority, multicultural, diverse audiences, you really got to start with what is the business case. So I want to spend a little time talking about what that is. And then based on my 20 or so years working in diversity and inclusion in a number of different roles, want to give you some real life tips from me, kind of diversity and inclusion according to Jocelyn, on what works when it comes to really creating authentic engagements with different multicultural audiences. But what's important, most important to me, is I want to spend time with discussion. So I didn't spend a whole lot of time putting together a presentation. I really want to spend more time really hearing from you and talking to you and having a discussion with you. So with that, I'll just get started. So again, my diversity roots kind of run deep. So for the last 20 years in a number of different roles, I have been involved in diversity and inclusion. I spent almost 20 years at General Motors in a series of communications and marketing roles. I had the first ever diversity communications role at General Motors almost 20 years ago. It was a carved out role. Before that, if you were in communications, and let me be clear, at General Motors, communications and marketing are totally separate empires that are run completely separately. And so 20 years ago, first of all, diversity communications was still very new. And if someone had responsibility for outreach for doing it, it was one of 7 or 8 jobs they had to do. And so if they had 7 or 8 roles, guess which one often kind of came last and got the least amount of attention? It was the diversity role. And then in 1999, a gentleman by the name of Ed Snyder, a dear mentor of mine and former boss, said, we're going to actually make this a full-time role. First year didn't give me any budget for it, thanks Ed, but we're going to make it a full-time role, and we're going to have someone focused solely on outreach. So my job at the time, I was responsible for outreach to African American, Asian, Hispanic, women, LGBTQ. And over time, had the opportunity to grow that role. He gave me money the second year, thanks Ed. And then the third year, I got people, so kind of every year, I'd get a little bit more, to the point when I left General Motors 3 years ago, I had the first ever, I'm seeing a pattern of first evers here. I had the first ever communications and marketing diversity role. So I led up what we call the Diversity Communications and Marketing Center of Excellence. And so we brought together for the first time people from communications and marketing, what a novel idea, to work together on outreach to this audience. Because if you're really going to reach any audience It really needs to be an integrated approach. So I applaud you guys for having an integrated program, very important. But in those 20 years, had an opportunity to do a number of different things, both internally when it pertains to diversity and inclusion. In fact, when General Motors named their first chief diversity officer, I led the effort around the communications effort around that and supported that person for the first 3 years of their tenure. Also worked a lot externally with a number of different national multicultural organizations. Also got to work on some really groundbreaking things. For instance, when the University of Michigan filed their amicus brief with affirmative action, using it in admission policies. General Motors was the first company to support those policies, and so I worked very closely on that. When General Motors decided to support the Martin Luther King Memorial on the Mall in DC with their initial $10 million investment, I was the one who led the PR on that. When General Motors and a number of other companies offered same-sex benefits to domestic partners for the first time ever, I was the one who did that. Got a couple death threats as a part of that as well, because my name was on the press release. So when your name's on a press release, you get a whole lot of stuff. I didn't know death threats was going to be one of them, but it's all good. It was a very worthwhile effort. So got to do a lot of, I think, really groundbreaking things, really important things, and it's really where I learned about the importance of engagement and authentic engagement. And especially on the multicultural side, these markets, you have to meet them where they are. You can't just, in the case of General Motors, sit in a building and send out a press release and expect that all of a sudden everybody's going to be excited about that and carry your message. You've got to go where they are. And that sometimes means, for sure, getting out of your comfort zone, doing things you're not used to doing, but it really is how you begin to build authentic connections and engagements. So about 3 years ago, decided with my best friend to branch out on my own and start my own agency, the Allen Lewis Agency. So we're 3 years old as a company, but between my business partner and I, we've got 40 years of experience in communications and marketing. Me, obviously, on the General Motors side. She spent nearly 20 years at Bosch and Valeo and Osram Sylvania. So we come together and we've got a kind of unique perspective on how you do things. And then the great thing was we were able to pick up the phone and call a number of our friends and say, hey, we're starting this entrepreneurial journey. Will you take this walk with us? No one hung up on us. Everybody said yes. And so we've been able to put together this great group of folks from across the country. We're headquartered in Michigan, but the great thing is we've got a team in Miami, we've got a team in Chicago, we've got a team in LA. So it's been really great to bring this group together and to start to kind of work on a number of different things, but under our own umbrella. And we've been blessed. We currently have 14 clients that we're working with across a number of different agencies. I'll tell you, when I left General Motors, I said the last thing I want to do is work with another automotive company. Guess what? We work with automotive companies. But we're also blessed. We get to work with other companies. We've actually got a funeral home, which is turning 100 years old next year. And I'll tell you, I got to be honest, when they reached out, I was kind of like, I don't know. But, I mean, it's a business that's always got clients. Let's be really clear about that. So have been excited to work with them, have had the opportunity to work with a number of individuals as well, a lot of authors who have written books and are looking to engage with media audiences and other audiences for sure. But without a doubt, the game changer for our agency over the last 3 years was when we got a call from Nissan. And after going through the RFP process, and if any of you know about the RFP process, you definitely want to slit your wrist with a butter knife. After going through that process and being named the multicultural PR agency of record for Nissan North America, a real game changer for our agency. I mean, to be a year old when this happened was really a big deal for us, and has allowed me personally to continue my work on the multicultural side and to continue engagement with multicultural audiences. So when we were named to Nissan, one of the things we did was we came up with what our brand promise would be to that client as it pertains to multicultural outreach. And this is really important to us. So I'll read it to you, and you can read for yourself, but I'll read it to you. So we create multicultural and diverse enthusiasts. And we were very, very specific about our words, through resolute inclusion, relationships, and authentic engagement, remaining attuned to cultural movements and intricacies unlike any other agency. And I really do stand on this. In the 20 years that I've been doing this, the thing that I've been able to do is really cultivate relationships. And those are mutually beneficial relationships. So I don't just call on media when I've got a press release or I got something bad going on and I want to keep out of the media. It's a constant relationship. Just this morning, I was already texting 3 or 4 different media people. So I reach out to help them. What stories are they working on? Might not have anything to do with any of my clients, but I'm always connecting them with people because you want to build these relationships so you can count on them in bad times, in good times, and again, it's just a way to be, I think, incredibly authentic. So let's talk for a couple of minutes about the business case of diversity, and I want to specifically share with you some numbers. Again, I have people say, hey, I really want my company or my brand to get more involved. How do I get my leadership's attention? And how you get your leadership's attention is numbers. They listen to numbers. So let me just share a couple with you right now. Some of them you may have seen before. According to the U.S. Census, by 2044, the minority population will be the majority population. In certain states, that is already occurring. In Texas, in California, in Florida, in New York, the minority population already outweighs what we still call, but not for long, the majority population. $3.4 trillion is what the U.S. multicultural buying power was in 2014. $3.4 trillion. This next one I used a lot at General Motors, and for the women in the audience, if you didn't know, 85% of consumer purchases are determined by women in the household. 85%. From toilet paper to automobiles and everything in between, we are running things. You're not surprised by that, of course. By 2021, African American buying power is estimated to be $1.5 trillion. 1.5 trillion. Nearly 20% of today's millennials identify as LGBTQ. Asian American buying power has increased by 257%. It's the fastest of all racial groups, 257%. 68% of multicultural millennials buy luxury products. They got a Gucci and they live in their mama's basement, but they got a Gucci. They got a Gucci though. They bought the Gucci. And there are more than 55 million Hispanics in the US. I could go on and on and on with numbers, but this is how you get the attention of your leadership. No longer can companies and brands afford to ignore multiculturals. The numbers are right here. Now, from a representation perspective, in a company, you say, okay, that's interesting, but how do I get, the attention still of my leadership? We've all been in the position where we're the only one in the room. You're the only African American, you're the only female, you're the youngest, you're the only one from West Virginia. We've all been in that place before. And so how you create inclusion internally so that you can then begin to kind of share that externally. So now I want to share with you a couple examples from my experience, probably most specifically over the last 3 years. I don't even think I have to go back to my General Motors years, but share some examples of some great things that I've been doing with clients in terms of creating authentic engagement. So this comes directly from when we did the RFP with Nissan. We did some research to see what were they currently doing, and then we made some recommendations. So the headers of each one of these are some of the recommendations that we made to them, but I would say they were applicable to just about any company or brand you may be working with. And first of all, that's simply, where do you get started? Enhance your current diversity efforts. Just about every company and brand is doing something. And when I went to Nissan, they said, well, we're doing, some stuff, we're not doing that much. And I said, first of all, pat yourself on the back for doing something. And then let's figure out how do you enhance the current things you're doing. So just a couple of examples, and I talked with them. They're okay with me sharing it, so I'm not sharing any secrets. They were at the BET Awards, but they were just kind of buying advertising to, kind of show their commercials during the awards. I said, why don't you take it a step further? I mean, you spend a lot of money just to do that. Why don't you start taking people with you to the BET Awards? Why don't you invite media to go with you to the BET Awards? And that gives you a showcase and a platform to begin to tell your story. Start inviting some of your leadership to the BET Awards. They need to see firsthand their consumer groups. Remember, if I told you, with multicultural markets, you've got to go where they are. So you're already spending money to be somewhere, actually go there. Actually go talk to the leadership. Go meet with the consumers who are there. Get involved in advocacy groups and really get involved. Nissan was supporting Reverend Jesse Jackson in Rainbow Push. Well, he has about 4 conferences a year. I said, why don't you have some of your folks start speaking at the conferences? Actually get involved. Push for panel positions. All of these organizations have awards, Company of the Year, this of the year, that of the year. Start submitting nominations for those. That starts to build your credibility in the diversity audience, in the diversity arena. Second, increase your multicultural presence in current platforms. Where is your company already doing things where maybe you could just dial up the multicultural presence a bit? In the automotive space, STEM is a really big thing right now. Well, guess what? STEM for multicultural youth is a really big thing. Why don't you marry the two? So we have Continental Automotive Systems. They make the tires. Was one of our clients, and they were, again, very involved in STEM education. So there's a conference called Women of Color STEM Conference. So we just said, why don't you do exactly what you're doing, same kind of stuff you're doing, sponsor the Women of Color Conference, and do the exact same activations you've been doing with other STEM organizations. So it's taking something you're already doing and just maybe tying it or giving it a spin from a multicultural perspective. Nissan, heavily involved in the Star Wars movies. Big time involved in the Star Wars movies. The last couple of Star Wars movies have had prominent roles for minorities and women. We said, why not take some minority and female media guests to your Star Wars premiere? It's just that simple. You're already sponsoring it. You're already taking some folks. Can we just maybe carve off a couple tickets and take some people of color and some women? Novel idea. Novel idea. The Consumer Electronics Show, huge, huge show out in Vegas in January. Every automaker is involved, all the tech companies involved. Again, we said, how about we reach out to some multicultural tech bloggers? They do exist. And let's engage them and take them as well. So it's taking things you're already doing and just adding, being inclusive. And then really start to build a strong presence in multicultural markets. I mentioned California, I mentioned Florida, I mentioned Texas. They're huge multicultural markets. For a company like Nissan, they sell cars everywhere. So we said, how about we just start taking a couple of these markets and let's start doing some test programs. And I'm incredibly proud of this particular program. So one of the things we also said we'd do, because for me, multicultural outreach isn't just about feel good. It has to tie to the business. I showed you the numbers. It has to tie. So we said, let's take an existing program that Nissan has. Let's take a societal issue, and let's tie it from a multicultural perspective. So Nissan already had a program called Snug Kids. It was a program that educates people on the right ways to use child safety seats. Because if anybody's got children, there's 1,000,001 child safety seats, and if your kid is this size versus this side, it's a rear-facing seat, a front-facing seat, a booster seat. It's so confusing. You need a PhD to kind of figure this out. So we said, and then we looked at the data that said Hispanic children are 12 times more likely to be harmed or killed in a car crash because they are not properly restrained in a seat, or not restrained at all, or in the wrong seat. So we said, okay, Nissan, you do the Snug Kids program. We've got this societal issue. Hispanic children are dying at alarming rates because they're not in the right seats or their parents don't have the right information. Let's marry this together. Let's create a program specifically for Hispanic moms that gets them educated. And let's do it in a highly concentrated Hispanic market. So we partnered with a blogging network by the name of Blogging Mamas, headquartered out of Orlando. We did our first program in Miami. And the key a lot of times to doing some of these programs is start with a manageable number and make it about quality over quantity. So we said we're going to invite 30 Hispanic mom bloggers to this event, and we're not just gonna just preach to them about child safety, because honestly, who kind of wants to totally hear that? We're going to do a day party for moms. So we're going to find a Hispanic restaurant in the Miami area. It's for Hispanic moms, so we're going to find a Hispanic restaurant in the Miami area run by a woman, owned by a woman. See the connecting of the dots? We're going to rent out this restaurant. We're going to do a day party. We're going to have a DJ come in. We're going to give them gifts. We're going to have a step and repeat and a red carpet, because who doesn't love a step and repeat and a red carpet, especially if you're a Hispanic mom blogger. They're always taking pictures. Always. So we're going to give them something to take pictures of. And oh, by the way, we're a car company, so we're going to have some really cool cars there that they can drive. Now, we called it a day party, and so you can't drink, so we're going to make these mocktails, though. And they're going to feel like they're drinking because we're going to put them in martini glasses. It's going to look all cool, and they got this DJ going, and they got gifts. And by the way, while they're there, we're going to do demonstrations on car safety seats. And then at the end of the event, because they're bloggers, we're going to give away a couple to those who blog the most about the event and who get these tips out. So we said we're just going to pilot this. We're just going to try this. So we did one in Miami in January 2017. And the Miami moms caused such a stink that we trended #2 in the country that day on Twitter. And so then this network started sending notes going, well, can you do it here? And can you do it here? So we've done one in Dallas. We've done one somewhere else in New York. And we just did one in San Francisco on Tuesday. And we won a PR Daily Award for doing this. And in the 4 that we've done, I would venture to say in 4 of these, we've spent less money than one brand would have spent going to the auto show one time. So it doesn't take a lot of money. You want to get a lot of money for your budgets, for sure. But it doesn't take a lot of money to authentically engage these audiences. It takes you showing up. It takes you being invested in the community. It takes you bringing relevant information to them. And that's what we've been able to do. And then you need to reinforce your key messages in multicultural markets. Whatever those key messages are, they transfer. This is a case of one of our clients, the National Newspaper Publishers Association. It's the national organization. It represents the top 200 African American papers in the country. They were having their convention in Detroit, and they're a newspaper organization. What's happening in the newspaper? It's applicable for African American newspapers, for mainstream newspapers. They're kind of in trouble right now. And so we suggested to them that they really needed to reconnect with their base. And if you're an African American newspaper serving the African American community, how do you get to the African American community? Through the African American church. And so we suggested to them, since they were coming to Detroit, and Detroit's full of mega churches, like most big cities, that we put on a gospel brunch and honor the top African American pastors in the city. So here's an African American organization that also needed help reaching out to the African American community. But it's about finding relevant ways to do that, finding target markets. There are markets out there that want to hear your message. You just have to reach out to them in authentic and relevant ways. And then for companies that are still grappling with how do I do this, remember charity begins at home. Just about every single company has some philanthropic activities that they're doing. How can you potentially maybe, carve out amount of money to specifically support local organizations that might have a multicultural audience, that might have a multicultural spin? And then again, if you're an IMC student, how do you attach media to that to get that message out? Just a couple of ways that you can begin to kind of really authentically reach out to multicultural audiences. So I told you I didn't have a whole lot because I wanted to spend this time really talking. So now I want to hear from you. What are you, if you work for a company and you're grappling with how do you do this? I've had the opportunity to have these conversations before. I have some real authentic conversations. The last one I had, I was really touched. I had a white gentleman raise his hand and say, "What can I do?" And I really appreciated that. So I want to have a real conversation, real discussion. Let me hear from you. What can I answer? What are your thoughts? Yes. And can you wait for the mic? Yep. Can you wait for the mic and tell me who you are and where you're from?
Sure. Hi there. Absolutely loved your talk. My name's Joe Gura. I'm from Seattle, and I work over at Microsoft. And one of the things that we've been doing since Satya Nadella became CEO about 4 years ago now is he has made a huge push in the diversity conversation when it comes from an accessibility point of view. People who are disabled or the elderly or all kinds of other types of situations people run into. And as I've done some work with that community myself, I've often heard it's one of the only minorities you only join, at some point in your life for one reason or another. And we will all join them because we will all be elderly one day, hopefully all of us.
Right.
And in that respect, I wanted to get your take and your perspective on how that is increasing and what you may be seeing as part of your portfolio or the advice you give your clients.
Sure, absolutely. Did you hear the question okay, or do you need me to repeat it? You heard it, good. I think that's an interesting perspective about it's one of the only groups that you join. Very, very important group. As I think you guys know, that I'm teaching a class here, and one of the things we'll look at for those who are in my class is specifically we're looking at the Latino population 55 and older, and as it ages. And the interesting thing is, old people today are not like old people before, and I can say that because I'm almost one of them. So. They're more technologically advanced. I mean, my dad had a Twitter page, which I thought was kind of weird, but he did. They tend to have more discretionary income. They're living longer. So it's absolutely, I think, an audience that needs to be engaged. I applaud Microsoft for thinking that way, because I think a lot of times when people start thinking multicultural and diversity, and that's why I like to use the word diversity, because a lot of these groups are not necessarily multicultural. But they're important groups, so I applaud Microsoft for doing that. I'll tell you, when I was at GM, one of the things we did, we actually had a retiree communications group. And I understand at GM you can kind of have more communications people than a lot of other brands, but we did. And it was very important that we kept retirees included on the new product offerings. So we do special events for them at the auto show or things like that. So I think it's a very important group to engage. Also, like women, like millennials, folks of a certain age and folks who might be disabled cut across all other multicultural groups. So it's a very important group to engage. So are you doing more of it internally or externally?
Well, I'd say a little bit of both. I think that a lot of the focus, and just to get a little inside baseball on you here, is that Satya's son himself is disabled, and so that's kind of where a lot of that comes from. So he was always active in the communities around that. And then it also bore out of, and I also worked with our accessibility group in our Trustworthy Computing division a few years ago, and helped do some of our external marketing and comms and events. So a lot of the things you just shared, I'm like, yes, those do work. Those are very good. And we've done those in those communities. But I suppose what I wanted to say is, because there is because it's got the CEO's personal attention, he looked at it from a perspective of, look, we have to make sure everyone can use these technologies. If you really want to make something for everyone, to the point of Nissan as you raised, it needs to be really for everyone and meet them where they live, and not just from a marketing perspective, but also engineering as well, and that's a whole other conference, I'm sure. But yeah.
Well, and I heard you just mention it there. I think it's really important if you've got an affinity group within your organization that's focused on people with disabilities, really, really listening to them and using them. Using them as a sounding board, a focus group, empowering them, looking at what are those external organizations that you maybe can partner with, sponsor events for, things like that. But I would absolutely say tap into that internal group if you're not already doing that. Very cool. Other questions, comments? We got one down. Oh, be careful, be careful, be careful.
My name is Dan Morris, and I work for a technology company in the health insurance space. And one of our SVPs started a program whenever he worked at Bayer Corporation called Careers to Be. And it's very internal within several companies now in the Pittsburgh market. And what it does is it allows senior leaders in companies to see that people who have some physical or mental challenges still have the ability to offer something very valuable with their efforts for any organization. And so we've done a great job internally with that and had a lot of success with it. And now we're trying to take that program more nationally. And our audience is really, senior folks in any type of large or small organization throughout the country. Any thoughts on kind of how to reach, we're trying to reach out to that community of folks. I mean, it's a very diverse
Absolutely it is.
community, yeah.
A couple of things, and I think this goes for both of you. The cool thing about social media is there are so many niche blogs and bloggers out there. So like you can find bloggers who blog about underwater basket weaving. So my point is there are bloggers and reputable media sources, and I'm not saying bloggers are not, oh gosh, who cater to niche audiences or what might feel like niche audiences. And so one of the first things that I did on the diversity communication side was I always look for where are those credible voices out there that I might be able to align my brand with. So I would say do some research on, because it's kind of applicable I think for both of you, do some research on who are some of those leading voices out there for people with disabilities or, aging people interested in tech. I mean, honestly, you can Google just about anything, but do your research, because just because they're out there and they got a computer doesn't mean they're credible. But find some of those credible voices, start reading their stuff, see what they're writing about and who's listening to them. And before you know it, you'll have like 5 or 6 names of some people that you want to reach out to and say, hey, would love to talk to you more about what my company is doing to reach out to people with disabilities or, older people who are using tech. But look for some of those voices and see how you can align yourself with them. And what I found also, and I specifically say, bloggers and social media, because they tend to be a little bit more open to having those dialogues. And again, the credible ones, because they're not necessarily always, they're not ruled by an editor who says, okay, yeah, I like that story, but I got 56 other stories that my editor wants to get out. You can really start to kind of get your messages out there to those audiences that are important to you, I think, a lot quicker. And again, in a more authentic way. But do your research and definitely find some of those credible ones. But I think they're out there. And then just keep doing the work and just get out in the community and show up at events and force your leadership to do the same. Because when you start getting out there, the word will spread that, oh, I was at this event and I got this. You'll get 62 business cards. 3 of them will be important to what you're doing. And it's about finding those 3 that are important. But you got to get out there. PR is a contact sport. And you got to get out there. You got to be out there. You got to get known in what you're doing. I can't tell you how many chicken dinners I went to in my life, but that's how you get out there and you build a reputation that your company cares, and it's how you meet people that will be helpful. Yes, right here. Be careful.
Okay, my name is Asia Lewis. I'm the CEO and founder of Empower LLC, which stands for Marketing Prominent Opportunities Worldwide with Experience Rapport.
You go, girl.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is, I know you mentioned you received death threats for, one of the, innovative ideas you, incorporated for the issue that was present. My question is, how do you address the negative backlash and continue to, press on despite, the negative energy you may receive for your ideas?
Well, I think you just said it. You just press on. Especially, social media is good, and then social media is a trip. Right. You're going to have trolls. You're going to have haters. You just are. There's someone who's not going to like what you're doing. There's someone who's not going to like that you're reaching out to this particular group. What I would say, and again, I just finished writing my courses for this upcoming semester, and I talk a lot about, as a company, as a brand, you have to be confident in what you stand for. Okay. And once you're confident in what you stand for, when all that comes, you just keep moving forward. But you also have to be prepared for it. So, for instance, when we came out in support of same-sex benefits, we knew we were going to get haters. I didn't personally know I was going to get some, but we knew we were going to get that. And so, first of all, we built a plan that we hoped was as bulletproof as it could be. Again, we knew stuff was going to come, but we built it as bulletproof as it could be. We had this extensive Q&A of, if you get this, what do you do? We prepped all of our leaders, and then we just went out and we stood on it. And that's the other thing. And in this world of, if you saw the Pepsi ad with Kendall Jenner, or you saw the Hallmark card for Father's Day about, baby's daddies, or there's all this stuff out there, and what happens is people put it out there, somebody barks, and then they retreat. Okay. If you're gonna stand for something, you gotta stand for it. And you do have to be prepared. And as a business owner, you do kind of have to watch what people are saying about you, but if you believe in something, then you stand for it, and you don't waver.
So my interpretation of that is preparation and perseverance.
Absolutely.
Okay.
You said it much better than I did.
Thank you.
What she said, what Asia said. Uh-oh. Okay, don't hurt yourself. You got a couple questions up there. You got a couple questions. Okay, all right. You're getting your cardio in. Yeah, you did it.
Hello, I'm Josh Bartholomew, and I work in the auto industry.
Yes.
And from a dealership standpoint, what's some things that we can do to embrace diversity in marketing to these consumers?
Good morning, Josh. A number of things. You guys are actually on the front line with consumers. At Nissan, their headquarters, you guys are right there. So you have such an opportunity. I think first and foremost, educating your staff, understanding your audience, kind of where's your dealership situated. What kind of customers typically come in, for instance, if you have a high percentage of Hispanic clients that come in, are your materials in English and in Spanish? If you have a high percentage of Hispanic customers, they tend to, the whole family comes to shop. So do you have a play area in your dealership? Do you have, just simple things. Do you have coffee and magazines available for grandma? Because grandma's coming with them. And again, do you have some of that stuff in Spanish? If you have a high percentage of women who come in, or women who come with men, are your dealership employees talking to the woman and the man, or are they just looking at the man? So it really, I think, again, starts with education for your dealership. So multicultural training for your dealership. I know some great agencies that would love to come in and train your dealership on multicultural training. But making sure that did y'all get that little plug right there? Was it so subtle that you just kind of missed it? But again, just making sure that your dealership understands the audiences. Are they getting out? Do you sponsor things in the community? Is your dealership leadership or salespeople getting out in the community? Are you guys involved in things? Do you sit on boards? There's a number of different ways to get started. I would say just get started in one of them and really start to do that one well and master that one. And again, in time, everybody will know you guys are doing things and you'll kind of become known for that. She's working her way down. So if you got a question, she's coming down. Get her while she's coming down. I know this gentleman over, yep, he friendly.
Hi, my name's Matthew, and I'm currently a student here, an undergraduate student at WVU. And my question is, you talk a lot about authenticity. And so my question is, now that you have such a diverse portfolio, how do you make sure that you keep that same authenticity when you're dealing with a bunch of different clients?
Thank you. It's I'm going to be authentic no matter what, like it or not. But it's about finding the time to give each and every client the attention they deserve. I had a client a couple of weeks ago, and this happens a lot, and they said, well, I know I'm not Nissan. And I said, that doesn't matter to me. You took a chance on me. This company has my name on it. You took a chance on me, and because of you, I'm able to be here. So it's making sure that each client knows they're important to us. I've got to leave here today to get back to Detroit because one of our clients is doing a concert. We have, it's called Shane Park. It's an outside amphitheater in downtown Detroit on the river, and they're doing a big concert tonight. And so I'm going to break my neck to get back there because they're important to me. So it's the same concept. It's showing up. And being engaged when I'm there. So when I'm with a different client, it's not like, oh, okay, I'm sorry, I'm talking to my Nissan client, I can't hear you. It's being engaged. It's knowing their business. It's knowing what their issues are. And I'll tell you though, what's been interesting for us is because you have one client and it might be in one industry, you'll think, oh, there's no way what I'm doing with Nissan is going to help my James H. Cole funeral home. But you'd be surprised the things you learn, the things you do, the people you meet when you're out, how they might be able to help a series of your clients. So it's always about, being present, showing up, and then connecting the dots. And I think that's what our clients appreciate about us because we're able to, find synergies. Because I might work with this one client, I can also help that other client. But in that authentic part too, it's also about being honest with clients. I'm all about, I will go to the ends of the earth and do whatever I can for you. But if what you're asking doesn't make sense for your brand, really isn't realistic, is not congruent with your brand, I'm going to be honest with you and tell you that. I'm not, I worked for 20 years on the other side of this, and I had some agencies that were just like, okay, I'll do whatever, but maybe it wasn't what was best for my brand. And so having the experience that I have now, I sometimes have to tell clients, you know what, I don't think that's the most consistent thing for you to do right now, or I don't think it's a great idea, but I don't think the time is right now for you. So being authentic also means saying no sometimes and being able to counsel folks on things. And it's hard, but I think at the end of the day, people pay me for my counsel.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Great presentation. Love your work. It's really thought-provoking for me. My name's Elizabeth. I'm here from Boston. I actually grew up in Morgantown, though, so I know my way around pretty well. In the past 8 years or so, most of my work has been doing marketing for U.S. universities to attract international students. And so some of this has been making me think a lot about that as well, and thinking about brands looking to attract a diverse audience versus a multicultural audience, and some of the education and intention that you need to maybe help a brand carry into that work. Part of what we ran into in our work was universities often want to attract international students. Well, what's an international student, and how do you talk to them? You don't, because what you need is a segmented audience to figure out that culture and that individual and their aspirations. So I have a couple questions that come out of all that, I guess. One is thinking about multicultural marketing in the US, what that looks like, how is that different from multicultural marketing internationally? So that's one question. And then also thinking about organizations that aren't as well resourced as Nissan or some of the big players who also want to be diverse in their marketing and really interact with integrity with a lot of different types of people. How would you advise them? Is the key really to choose specific segments that make sense for them to be authentic in that way you discuss, or how should they approach this?
Sure. I think, first of all, multicultural marketing in the U.S. is very different from multicultural marketing outside of the U.S. And the majority of my work has been in the U.S. Where that has expanded globally was with women. Because the moment you start talking, and I know you said multicultural, but first of all, rarely will you even hear that outside of the U.S. So the moment you talk diversity outside the U.S., everybody goes, oh yeah, we love women. It's kind of, women are the universal moniker for diversity. So it's a very different discussion outside of the U.S. And I mean, when you start talking Latin America countries or things like that, it's a very different conversation. If you, I ran OnStar Communications for a number of years, and I had the opportunity to launch OnStar in China in 80-some dialects. So what multicultural looked like in China was very different than what it looks like here. So I think the first thing is really knowing your audience. Who are you trying to talk to? And if it's everybody, then I would say start somewhere. And to the question of, for companies that maybe don't have the budgets that Nissan has, and most of my clients don't, I think everything I told you is applicable whether you've got $100,000 to spend or $1 million to spend. It's about starting somewhere and knowing your organization and saying, of all of our business, and starting with your business objectives. What are the business objectives for you? Again, don't just do this just to be doing it. It's gotta tie to the business. So what are your business objectives? And of all those audiences out there, what's the first one that you can work with that you think will get you some quick wins? Because if you want to grow your multicultural outreach, your multicultural marketing or communications, you got to get some wins. Because if folks are going to give you some dollars to do something, they're going to want a return on their investment. So you want to be smart and start with the place that you think you can have the greatest effect the quickest, and then it'll start to grow. So, but again, I think kind of all of that is applicable. What's your organization already doing? Can you start to talk to some of your international students in your university and really use them as a sounding board, as a focus group? Give them an official name. Everybody wants to be a part of a group, so give them some official name and use them as your advisory board to help you start to put this plan together. You're welcome.
I think we have time for one more question. And Summer, did you have? She answered it. Oh, she answered it? Okay. All right. So I'm gonna run over there.
You probably could have just handed the mic across. It would have been, you just want that cardio. She's coming.
Hi, I'm Mark, and I'm from Florida, so now currently. So my question, I think, might be of interest to a lot of the people here. I think your female blogger Hispanic effort was great. I think that's a tremendous thing. I happen to know, too, that in some markets more than others, the Hispanic community can be very, very complex. So what I was wondering here is, one of the things, especially at Capstone, they're going to talk about is segmentation and everything. Mm-hmm. How did you deal with that complexity at that event?
You are so right, because it's Puerto Rican, it's Dominican. Yeah, it's, again, this is a starting point for us. So we kind of went general Hispanic mommy bloggers. But guess what we did? We had like a Puerto Rican DJ, and then we had Dominican food, and then we tried to, in this one event, be all things to everyone, and you gotta be careful with that, and that can be difficult. Even down to the point of one time, one of the moderators we had, she had more of I think a Colombian accent, and someone actually said something about that. They were like, well, most of us are not from Colombia, and she had a Colombian accent. So you do have to be careful, but again, I think in that authentic piece, people knew this was our first effort, and we were honest about that. And you'll be surprised, people will give you room and slack, at least if you're trying. And so we were very, very honest and upfront about, hey, this is a pilot program. We're trying this. Give us feedback. That's how we got the feedback that her accent was a little bit more Colombian than they would have wanted. But I think people can see when you're being authentic, and they appreciate that you're showing up. And so they kind of gave us some slack for that. But that is one of the things going forward. Again, I said we just did this one in San Francisco. And the other thing we found is every group has been different. The Hispanic moms in Miami were very different than the Hispanic moms in Dallas. So every single group, there's so much diversity within diversity. But again, I think it's about just getting out there and trying and engaging and actually asking for people's feedback. And trust me, they'll give it to you. They will give it to you. So I think that was all I had for questions. I do want to thank you. If you want to continue the conversation, there are ways to reach me. On all channels, the agency is TRYTALA, TRYTALA, which stands for the Alan Lewis Agency. So on all channels, you can find us there. You can find me personally on Twitter as the Execudiva. Would love to continue the conversation and just really appreciate the opportunity to talk with you. Thank you.